Today we're going to draw some complex organic shapes. And so what I've done here before is just drawn the side view, front view, and top view of a mouse. It has nice organic shapes and they have different sort of surface transitions, which is a good example of this kind of type of sketching. So I've prepared that off screen. And today what I'll do is digitally sketch sort of how I would go about sketching these views in perspective on their respective planes. So to kind of get caught up, you can pause the video and sketch out your own kind of shapes for your own mouse, and then we can do the sort of sections together. So to get started, you really want to just, and I wanted to do this in Procreate here, because I can kind of turn off and on layers, so I can explain things a little bit easier than if they were analog. So what I'll do first is always whenever importing something, change the opacity. It used to be on normal, and change the layer mode to multiply. What this does is make it possible to put layers below it, so you're not obstructing line work, and you can still see the colors sort of showing up. So that's just the multiply layer setting. It's also available on Photoshop. And so what I'll do here is just assign kind of like a color to each side view, or each view, just so we can kind of see them a bit better. And we can kind of get started in drawing or projecting this side view that has no perspective foreshortening onto our perspective grid. So here what I've done is I've just kind of mapped out a 1x3 square for the side view, and a 2x3 rectangle for the top view, and then we can kind of stitch in the front view as well, and the sections throughout the whole thing. So the idea here is to, now what we're really focusing on is this blue surface. That's going to be the side view, and I'll just use the blue line work to outline essentially this properly foreshortened onto our perspective grid. So you can sort of see that it doesn't actually go across the entire length. It'll probably just go sort of, there's an undercut at the beginning, at the end, maybe it goes a little bit farther. And really what I'm looking for here is this sort of ratio, the distance between the top and the bottom, and it looks like it's kind of 1/3 from the top. So you can use that same idea where, if this is half, then this is something around 1/3, and that's where I'm looking for the sort of starting point of my mouse, the front of the mouse. And now we can also sort of use the lines that we have existing. This looks to be around the top. Maybe it's actually a little bit taller. We can make it a bit more round. But again, guidelines that can kind of help us hit our marks. So if that goes a bit higher, this can go a bit higher too. Maybe that goes around half. And so the idea here is now we want to just have a nice curved line. That goes through all our points and terminates sort of at the start and end of that first line that we did. We can also draw in this, the indication of the scrolling wheel. So that's it for the blue. I will add the green on another layer so we can toggle them on and off. And so right now we're seeing now we're looking at actually maybe I'm going to turn off the other layer. So for the green layer, which will be this one, we need to now look at the bottom surface. And so here we need to have a straight-ish line. Maybe I can round it a bit, but we're not going all the way to the ends, as per what the sketch here is. And then what we want to do is have like a nice round back. And to kind of I always like to use ellipses wherever I can. And here it looks kind of circular, elliptical. So I've just essentially drawn an ellipse here to sort of get some of that line work down, that general geometry. kind of strengthen those lines a bit. So that's looking pretty good. And that's kind of it for the top view. So now we can toggle that off and then use the orange for the side view. And the side view, oops, the side view here really is a, like it's really this, what I've sketched here is really the, like the absolute middle of the piece, but it's important to get all the sections in this. So here, I can get rid of some of that line, but knowing this is sort of my plane, I know that I only need to kind of go, again, not so far because there's an undercut on this design. So maybe what I'll do is actually get rid of that altogether. And it goes, close to the edge, but not quite. And now what I need to do is find sort of, maybe I will draw a little box for this in dark, just to kind of have something to work with. Okay, so that's our plane. It looks like it's kind of 2 squares by 1, which is great. So back on the orange, we are going to, we've got that as our high point. Now we need to define sort of midway points over here and here. Maybe a little bit lower. And now we need to draw in this kind of curvature. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got our front view. We have our top view. And we have our side view. Now notice that there are things that are necessary, like joining up correctly, because we have this sort of undercut in the design. The end here, the only reason that you draw the green line to the edge is because of the sort of top part of the design. So, but that's not the true sort of base of the object. If we looked at the underside, we would see that there would be a smaller sort of footprint. So these are things that we need to start to stitch together, and it actually makes sense to kind of cut through the object sort of in splices. So imagine if you're like sort of slicing this like a loaf of bread. We have already some of the line work here in our, actually I guess we have this one as well. This is the one that we drew, but we can do a couple more to essentially give us an idea of how the organic form transitions as it goes throughout the object. So what I'll do now is essentially to start picking up the geometry, starting from front, going to back, to basically do like smaller changes where as we go through the object, the kind of cross-section changes a bit, and then we'll have a nice set of geometry to work from to get our complex form. Okay, so now what we have here is cross sections like I've drawn through the side view in perspective. And that's really helpful because we're able to start to see the form start to take shape. So now we actually have that bottom, these bottom corners are now going to be the connection for the footprint of the mouse, and also those middle sort of corners are going to become these sort of points here that denote the top half from the bottom half. So yeah, now what we can do is start to, and maybe I'll come in with the actual kind of, like a black pen kind of idea here, where we can start to sketch the actual form coming together. And so here, it doesn't really matter exactly where you start, but sometimes it's just fun. It's good to do the sort of outline of it first. These are pretty easy to do, and a lot of the work that we've done so far is really just like to get us to a point where we're comfortable defining that outline and the contour of it. So again, I'm flipping my page around just so I can get a better angle. For drawing, it works the same on digitally, I would say as well. So now we're kind of defining that form. It's a nice sharp sort of cut here. Maybe we can accentuate that a bit. Okay, very good. I actually don't like what's going on over here. Oops. With this line. Okay, and we'll just strengthen that outline. And now we've got this. So actually, what we can do now, or also what we'll do is also add in, I guess, the detail here of that kind of cutaway, so that you have like the left and right side. So then this is kind of a little bit recessed, and we have the click wheel also, in the design. So, what we can do is come in here and use following the blue line. We can define sort of the cutaway that we'd like to define, and maybe it'll kind of, round off in a way that maybe it like mimics the roundness of the front here. That works quite well. And then what we need to do is we have our perspective grid. So this is, that orange line, or this line here, that's going to be our minor axis, and that's where we will place our ellipse. Now I'm drawing digitally, so actually I can even draw an ellipse and edit it to my liking, which is quite useful. So again, it's like, you want to line up these the line work here. So here I will just do a similar thing. Where we have our ellipses, maybe I'll kind of get rid of some of these lines that we don't need. That's really nice. And maybe I'll give it a little bit of body, so that we're, just like we were using the sectionals for the overall shape of the mouse, kind of giving some more body to this click wheel. And strengthening some line weight. Doing some shading in a way to kind of denote that this is sort of recessed and hidden, inset. Maybe we would have to have some sort of divider here so that there would be some sort of clicking motion. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And really there's lots of stuff going on. I can get rid of the other layers, that one as well. And we can kind of take a look at it as far as the sort of overall shape. It's a little bit shaky here and there, so what I'll do is just come back in with some more stronger line weight to define the form a bit. And these are all things that you can do to, help the visual sort of read of the object. You can go in and, I can be obsessive with the layers and this and that, but I find that that's not always super useful. So I'll try to not do so much editing and just focus on the drawing here. And try not to do that so often. Yeah, and I feel like this just needs to be a bit more rounded. That'll probably be better. Oops. I also need some line weight here. And I like to have kind of lines, the construction kind of lines. I'm not going to get rid of all of them, but if we are digital, you can get a bit sort of obsessive with what you see and what you don't. I honestly prefer having all of the kind of constructions because then you learn how to draw a bit better. Alrighty. And maybe what we'll do here is have some sort of, and I want to strengthen this line, but I also want to maybe I kind of want it to be a bit more fluid. Oh, that's looking pretty good. That's looking pretty good. Yeah. And maybe what we'll need is, I don't know, some sort of we can add some more divisions to kind of make this more interesting. So maybe there's something, some sort of rim that falls along this, and that's a good sort of exercise in general, just to follow a curve, kind of offset a bit. It might be a different kind of material, more material change, but it just gives us more information. And so on this side, it'll be quite a lot smaller, and it'll start to curve away actually a little bit sooner than that, because you won't be able to see it on the other side. If we bring back this guy, what this is doing is kind of showing, we have these points here, but where this is on that side is kind of here, so it's actually hidden. So you're not able to see it, which is why kind of going with this, trim around the body of the mouse is actually going to start curling away at one point, and you're not going to end up seeing it. So, we can add some things to kind of help with the form readout in general. Sometimes adding back those sectionals as kind of construction lines really does help, especially on like the big points. And yeah, so we can do a little bit of hatching just to kind of add in some visual interest here. And maybe I'll just start, to just define the form a little bit, adds a little bit of shading. And yeah, what we can do here is maybe just do another layer and do a little drop shadow. And so this is, again, kind of like the trim we're really just trying to do sort of an offset line. And what I can do on this layer as well is kind of come in and select what I'd like. Drop in a drop shadow and always kind of correct it a bit with some more, color where it's necessary. This is by no means part of the complex sort of organic shape, but just to finish off the piece to a presentable sort of state. And that layer, since it's its own layer, we can kind of maybe, darken it or make it more opaque. And maybe we want it a little bit softer, so we can kind of go with a soft airbrush on it. And no, this is actually huge, that's why. Just to soften up sort of the edges, maybe just make it a bit more prominent sort of about the object here. Yeah. And so that's sort of a little bit of an overview on how to draw more complicated organic shapes. And I can kind of go through the layers here to define it a bit. So yeah, we would have setting up your perspective grid, drawing in technical sort of side views really helps in establishing the design, the form, and then subsequently going through and drawing the major sort of outlines and cross sections help us to give the form some more definition. And so kind of building on that, you end up getting, kind of complicated geometry, but this is all sort of in hopes to make it easier for you to draw the final sort of drawing. And in this case, I'm doing this digitally, but the process kind of still applies. You just need to either do underlays or draw lightly with your pen so that you can kind of get all those construction lines, because even with these sort of multicolored lines, they still give it some form. And as you probably noticed, there were some cases in which I added back in some of the construction lines to give the form some more definition. So yeah.